Good afternoon, I'm Ray, welcome to my channel. It is Sunday the 2nd of May today, which means that we are into the 1900 to 1950 readathon that's going on for all of May. Obviously it started yesterday, so I thought I'd start a weekly vlog. I can't tell if this is one day late for starting on the 1st of May or one day early for starting on a Monday, but hey, we're here. I already shared my TBR for the books that I wanted to read this month, and I'm literally on day 2 and I've already strayed from it, which is quite classic. However, I'm only straying within the context of 1900 to 1950, so that's okay. So far, I have started a couple of audiobooks. One of them is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This was on my TBR. This is my 1900s book. It is the story of Dorothy from Kansas. She gets swept up in a tornado and lands in this mysterious fantasy world, and it's then the story of her trying to find her way back home with the whimsical characters that she meets along the way. I think I'm about halfway through it already. It's a children's book, it's also quite short. I'm listening to it on Audible Stories for free. I'll leave a link down below. It's nicely narrated, quite a sort of sweet narrator. The story is very sweet. I think in the film, I remember the film being a bit scary in places. Maybe that's because I haven't watched it since I was a little child, but the book doesn't feel scary really at all, and it does feel like it's aimed at quite young children. It's a very fable-esque story. You've got an absolute classic quest journey going on. I'm only about halfway through. It's very much a book where there's like clearly defined good, clearly defined evil, and there's this obvious kind of moral message that you already have within you, the things that you seek. So that's the first thing that I'm listening to on audiobook, and then I also started listening to W.E.B. Du Bois's series of essays, The Souls of Black Folk. They are also an early 1900s publication. I am just at the beginning of those, into the first essay. W.E.B. Du Bois was an early voice in the American Civil Rights Movement, an incredibly well-educated man, and you can just tell that in his writing. It's so profoundly intelligent, and I'm really looking forward to reading a bit more about those. So far in the first essay, he's just talking about that sense of being different because of the colour of his skin, of being rejected, of being in this awkward limbo between sort of wanting to be accepted by his white peers, but also kind of being disgusted by the fact that he feels the need to sort of be better than them, to be accepted by them. It's really well written so far, and also just like profoundly disappointing, the fact that it feels so relevant more than 100 years after it was written. In terms of physical book, I have started reading D.H. Lawrence's The Rainbow. This is a multi-generational family saga set in Nottinghamshire, and it tells the story of the Brangwen family. It examines issues such as sexuality, fulfillment, and also the effect of industrialization. So it's a historical fiction because it goes back to the 1940s, even though it was written in 1915. I really love Lawrence's writing. I haven't read his books for a while, and coming back to this one just instantly has reminded me why I love his writing so much. So like, there's just so much to get out of everything in his writing, and I love authors like that where you can kind of simultaneously enjoy the writing just for the description, for the plot, but where also every paragraph just feels rich with meaning, and that is Lawrence to me. So it says, the Brangwens had lived for generations on the marsh farm, in the meadows where the Erewash twisted sluggishly through alder trees, separating Derbyshire from Nottinghamshire. Instantly you have marsh farm, you have this idea of there being something stagnant. The Erewash twist sluggishly. They're in this sort of slow pace of life, but literally from the first sentence you know that these characters are kind of trapped in this slow pace of life. Maybe they want more, maybe they want to escape. And then you have the rest of the first paragraph. It says, 2 miles away, a church tower stood on a hill, the houses of the little country town climbing assiduously up to it. Instantly you have another kind of layer to the themes, just like added there, boom. There's this idea of the church being like the highest point in society, the people of the different classes like aspiring to work up to the church, and I've only read a few pages of this, but already there are just so many rich themes coming out. That being one of them, this relationship between the church and the church really being representative of the middle classes rather than being representative of God, but the relationship between the church, the vicar, and the working class people who are working the land initially, and then also the working class people who are working in the mines, so who are even like further down in the depths of hell than the privileged vicar. Lawrence then goes ahead to discuss in the first chapter how it's particularly the women who are looking outwards, they're looking like out of the front of their house, whereas the men are looking out the back to the farm. So it's the women who are looking looking forward, who are seeking and craving something new, more so than the men. And this is, I think, something that Lawrence quite often explores in his writing, and people have different responses to. Like, I know one of my friends really disliked Lady Chatterley's Lover because she felt like it was just a man painting his idea of a portrait of a woman, whereas I really liked Lady Chatterley's Lover because I felt like Lawrence achieved in his portrait of a woman who I resonated with. So yeah, I just think he's an incredible writer, and I'm really happy to have picked this up. Hi, it's Thursday, and I have some updates on the things that I've been reading for the 1900 to 1950 readathon. So I've finished The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and I think my reflections on it probably remain very similar to when I'd read the first half of it. I found it a sweet story. Its themes were very obvious, very much at the surface. There was the theme of friendship, there was the theme of going home, and mostly there was this theme of self-belief and of the fact that we already have within ourselves what we need in order to succeed. The story did feel very aimed at younger children. The structure was very much problem resolution, problem resolution, problem resolution. You would get a problem, a challenge on their way that crops up in one chapter, and then the next chapter it gets resolved. And then within that there was the overarching problem of Dorothy trying to get home. I guess there was a little bit of a kind of political perspective on it in terms of looking at fraudulent leadership, at people believing that things are otherwise than they really are, and at an incompetent leader creating this sort of mirage effect around him, which makes him appear to be an effective leader when in reality he is not. The one thing that I did find quite interesting in it was, on the one hand, there was quite a colonial style to the way that some of the problems got solved, in terms of a happy ending for many people turned out to be, you can rule over these people. And a lot of the people or animals or whatever they were in the world of Oz were kind of clamoring to be ruled over. So that was a bit of an interesting take on it, as was the idea that, like, so-and-so has arrived from America and so they can fix everything. Dorothy just landed from America and look at her already destroying all evil because she is American. That was maybe a little bit problematic, but there was one part that really interested me where they had all these China figurines, and they were pretty much the only people in the novel who did not want to have a ruler. And when Dorothy wanted to take one home to put them on the mantelpiece, the China shepherdess said, "No thank you, I don't want to, I'm much happier here in my own world than I am having to be frozen on a human shelf." So that was the only bit that kind of went contrary to the otherwise quite kind of colonial feel to the writing. But yeah, that was my digging and attempt to get a little bit beneath the surface of it, because it really is quite a fairy tale feeling, quite simplistic story. I have started a new audiobook which I'm listening to in the car on the way to and from work. This is another one that's off-piste from my TBR, and it is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. This was published in 1939 and it's an American novel. It's crime noir. Private Inspector Philip Marlowe has been called to the Sternwoods mansion. They're a slightly dodgy, dealing, extremely rich oil family. The father is dying in his bed, and there's these two daughters, Vivian, the elder, who is married, and Carmen, the younger daughter. But neither of them are very old, both of them are like in their early 20s. The father says that one of the children has got caught up in a blackmail issue and he wants the private inspector to sort it out. So that's where we begin the novel. It is very much not the sort of thing that I normally listen to. I bought it on Audible ages ago. I think maybe it was on offer, and I know that the only reason that I bought it was because I'd seen, you have those penguin mugs, like I have one with Jane Eyre on it, and there is one for The Big Sleep which I've seen, and I literally just got it because I was like, this is a famous book, it's on a penguin mug. I started listening to it, I'm maybe about a third of the way through, and I have so many thoughts and feelings about it. It is, on the one hand, very male feeling, very misogynistic. Can't get around that. Literally all of the women in it who I've met so far, without exception, are primarily described in terms of their sexual attractiveness to the narrator, and I feel like I ought not to like it, but I am absolutely loving it. It is just so well written. I've never read anything like the narrative style. His descriptions are, I don't know how he does it. They almost feel forensic, the detail. Like, he enters a scene and he paints a picture before your eyes, just like a private detective or a policeman would do if they were giving a police report of it, and you can just visualize everything. I am very much normally a kind of audio reader, like I hear the voices in my head. I don't often see it in imagery, but in The Big Sleep, I am picturing everything. His descriptions of people, it honestly just feels like you're watching one of those kind of speed sketch artists, like sketch the picture in front of your face as you're listening to it. It's absolutely incredible. At the same time, the writing is really pared back. I don't know how he manages to be so excessively descriptive and pared back at the same time. It's an incredible writing style, and his use of metaphor also is amazing. These descriptions are extremely metaphorical. Quite a lot of the metaphors are a bit out there, almost funny, and yet quite harsh. This world is very dark, it's raining all the time, he's dealing with a lot of dodgy men and these sort of like sexy but stupid women. It kind of feels formulaic, but I think it is the formula that created the formulaic crime novel. Yeah, I'm about a third of the way through. I am absolutely loving it. I got stuck in traffic the other day on the way back from work. It took me like an hour to get home when it normally is a 10 to 15 minute drive, and I didn't even mind because I was just so enjoying listening to the writing of this book. So really that's where I'm up to with my reading. Haven't made much progress with The Souls of Black Folk as finishing The Wizard of Oz. Haven't really made much progress with The Rainbow. Have definitely been struggling to find time to actually read. Audiobooks absolutely have been saving the day for me again. Work is very busy at the moment, writing reports. I have a parents' day tomorrow, so my school, this is one really lovely thing that my school does do. Instead of having parents' evenings like you do in the UK, it's like a parents' day, so the children don't come to school during the day, but you just have your parents' evening style appointments throughout the day. So I have like back-to-back meetings with all of the children's parents all day tomorrow, which I hope goes well, but is always a day that feels quite anxiety-inducing. So I'm hoping that tomorrow goes well, but I know it will be a pretty tiring day. However, I can look forward to listening to The Big Sleep on the way to and from said day, however tiring and stressful it turns out to be. We have a fairly chill weekend planned. Hopefully I will be able to do a bit more reading, and I will give you a final update on how I've got on with my reading this first week of the 1900 to 1950 readathon on Sunday. Hello, it's Sunday, back again in my cozy corner to give my final reading update of the week. So, I have finished The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. I think when I last spoke on Thursday, I was about a third of the way through, and I have done a lot of listening to it, obviously, over the last few days. To be honest, after about a third of the way through, I kind of like lost track with what was happening. I had to sit down for absolutely ages on SparkNotes and read through the chapter summaries to work out who was who, because there just suddenly was a lot of like classic crimey stuff, which as a plot line, my head doesn't really get around very easily. There were just a lot of cookie cutter evil men who were like informing on each other and shooting each other, and I couldn't really work out who was who. And then there weren't very many women, but all the women in it were also exactly the same. They were all dumb, blonde, giggly, sexy. Like I said, It was very misogynistic. It was also homophobic, although I was quite intrigued by Chandler's approach to Marlowe the narrator's status, because he was really actively repulsed by the women throughout the novel. There was one bit in the book where he wakes up in the morning and he was like, I felt hungover. You can have a hangover from things that aren't alcohol. I had a hangover from women. Women make me sick. He just like really genuinely, it was clear throughout the book that all the women in it did make him sick, and there were a few little references, like there's one point where he's kind of been knocked out, and when he comes around, the first thing that he says is he wants to be buried with the worms because worms are both male and female and any worm can love any other worm, and that seemed to me to be a little bit telling. So I found him absolutely fascinating, Philip Marlowe. It was just like, this is one of those books that feels like it should be on the GCSE curriculum. Like, there's so much that you can get out of it, but also the stuff that you can get out of it feels quite close to the surface. Like, the themes feel reasonably accessible. So for example, right at the beginning of the book, he walks into the Sternwoods mansion, and the first thing that he sees is a knight in shining armour on a stained glass window who is saving a damsel in distress, a naked lady who is tied to a tree. And this kind of theme of knighthood runs throughout the book, and this idea of chivalry, and is Philip Marlowe being chivalrous? Is he being a modern day knight? What does a modern day knight look like? Does he see himself as a modern day knight, or is he just doing his job? Is he even doing his job well? What does it look like to be a gentleman in modern society with all of these awful women around? Yeah, it was just absolutely fascinating. Like, there were such interesting themes in it, and I loved every second of listening to it. I've also been listening to Du Bois's essays. I've listened to the first 4 of them. I'm really liking them. Each one takes a slightly different tack. There has been a lot about the history of the American Civil Rights Movement, but these essays were published like in the 1900s, so it's kind of talking about quite a short period between emancipation and the modern day, the progress that's been made, his kind of analysis of various political figures in that time, what they've done well, what they haven't done well. Du Bois writes with so much dignity about situations where he is not given the dignity that human beings deserve, and he writes so sympathetically about other people in even harder situations than his own. He's just an incredible man. His writing is gorgeous to listen to, and I think I'm going to also find a summary of it on the internet so that I can kind of take some notes for myself on the key historical facts from the book, because it's a time period that I don't know an enormous amount about, and I feel like because I've been listening to it rather than reading it, some facts, figures, statistics, perspectives have not been absorbed where I ought to be absorbing them. So I would like to sit down and study the kind of core content of it a little bit more. But in terms of the actual writing style and the essays, I feel like they're very accessible and depressingly still very relevant, and I'm really glad that I picked them up. The last thing, of course, that I've been reading is The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence, and I'll be quite perfectly honest, I have not got very far through this at all. I think I'm like 20 pages in. I am really, really, really enjoying it. It is so well written, and one of the reasons that I'm such a short way through it is because it is so dense in the best possible way. Like, there is so much to get out of every single page, and I'm wanting to get that richness and depth out of the writing. So far we've just had a bit of a kind of skim introduction to the first generation of the Brangwen family, you know, mother, father, and their children. The children grow up, and Lawrence describes the different professions that they go into. Something that Lawrence does so well is that every single character that he introduces, even if the character is only present for like a page, 2 pages, they are, as Ian Forster would say, a round character rather than a flat character. Like, they all feel real. They're all fleshed out and developed in some way. There's no character who's just beaming good person. Everybody has their flaws. A lot of people are real kind of overthinkers, and the character who we're focusing on at the moment, who's called Tom Brangwen, is definitely going off the rails a little bit. He's not quite sure what to do with his life. He sort of feels like he's superior to the life that he's living, and yet he can't get out. Like I was saying when I was doing my kind of close analysis of those first lines, he's sort of stuck and stagnant at Marsh Farm, and he wants to escape. He's looking beyond, but he's not quite sure where to go. He's particularly attracted to foreigners. There's been a couple of occasions on which he's met foreign people, and they really spark something in him, some desire, some fascination. But at the moment he's still stuck at home on the farm, not really knowing what to do with himself. So yeah, I'm absolutely loving it, but I have found it really hard to make the time. I think I mentioned on Thursday that Friday was this Parents' Day thing, which it was. It went absolutely fine, but then I got to the end of the day and I had a migraine. And I am kind of back in a phase of life where I am feeling extremely tired and getting really bad headaches a lot, and listening to audiobooks is just a much more accessible way for me to consume my books at the moment rather than reading the actual book. Next weekend I have a 3-day weekend. We have a kind of bank holiday weekend here, which I'm really looking forward to, and I'm hoping to do a bit of a kind of little personal readathon and see how much I can get read of actual books in those 3 days. So I'm kind of just accepting that the Rainbow is going to be a bit on hold, and has been a little bit on hold so far, but I'm getting very good vibes. So that's where I'm up to after week 1 of reading for the 1900 to 1950 readathon, which is hosted by Katie over at Books and Things. I'm really quite satisfied with my first week of reading, to be honest. Like, I finished 2 books, which is more than I would have expected to, given how busy I have been. I am actually going to start a new audiobook next, because when I'm driving in the car I can't use the Audible stories, which is the way that I'm listening to Du Bois's essays, so I'm gonna have to use another audiobook from my actual Audible on my phone. I have 2 things that fall between 1900 and 1950. I have some Chekhov plays which I might fall back on. I have read them before, so they would be a reread for me, and the only other thing I have that I haven't read yet is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I have strong suspicions that this is not going to be a great audiobook. It's a kind of coming-of-age, stream of consciousness, modernist novel by James Joyce, who also wrote Ulysses, which I have not read but have read 1 chapter of, and it was not easy to understand at all. I believe that A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is a lot more comprehensible than Ulysses. It tells the story of Stephen Dedalus, interesting name, who is a young artist in Dublin, and it's a kind of coming-of-age novel about him. That's all that I know about it. I'm gonna give that a go in the car. It's only 8 hours long, so it is a fairly short one. Modernist books I have not read for a long time. I really struggled with them when I was younger, like I just didn't get them, and so I kind of abandoned them for genuinely years and years. Like, I didn't even study them at university, so I basically haven't really read much modernist fiction since probably I was about 16, 17, 18. I'd like to think that I have grown as a reader now and might be able to understand what's going on a bit more, but I also suspect that stream of consciousness as an audiobook is not going to work very well. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to be my next listen anyway. Also off-piece for my TBR, but there you go. If you're participating in the readathon, let me know down below how your reading is going, or indeed whatever it is that you're reading, whether you're reading between 1900 and 1950 or not. Let me know if you've been reading anything good lately. I really hope that you enjoyed this reading vlog. Please do like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. It really does help my channel grow, and I appreciate you all very much for being here. I really love this space where I talk about books with you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.